into paper forms that had to be filled out. One day it became clear to me that I would become a painter, an artist. My father was struck speechless. Painter? Artist? He doubted my sanity, or perhaps he thought he had heard wrong or misunderstood me. But when he was clear on the subject, and particularly after he felt the seriousness of my intention, he opposed it with all the determination of his nature. Artist? No, never as long as I live. My father would never depart from his never, and I intensified my nevertheless. One consequence of this encounter, Hitler later explained, was that he stopped studying in school. I thought that once my father saw how little progress I was making at high school, he would let me devote myself to my dream, whether he liked it or not. This, written 34 years later, may be partly an excuse for his failure at school. His marks in grade school had been uniformly good, but at the Linz High School they were so poor that in the end, without obtaining the customary certificate, he was forced to transfer to the state high school at Steyr, some distance from Linz. He remained there but a short time, and left before graduating. Hitler's scholastic failure rankled in him in later life, when he heaped ridicule on the academic gentry, their degrees and diplomas, and their pedagogical airs. Even in the last 3 or 4 years of his life at Supreme Army Headquarters, where he allowed himself to be overwhelmed with details of military strategy, tactics, and command, he would take an evening off to reminisce with his old party cronies on the stupidity of the teachers he had had in his youth. Some of these meanderings of this mad genius, now the supreme warlord personally directing his vast armies from the Volga to the English Channel, have been preserved. When I think of the men who were my teachers, I realize that most of them were slightly mad. The men who could be regarded as good teachers were exceptional. It's tragic to think that such people have the power to bar a young man's way. March 3rd, 1942. I have the most unpleasant recollections of the teachers who taught me. Their external appearance exuded uncleanliness. Their collars were unkempt. They were the product of a proletariat denuded of all personal independence of thought, distinguished by unparalleled ignorance, and most admirably fitted to become the pillars of an effete system of government, which, thank God, is now a thing of the past. April 12, 1942. When I recall my teachers at school, I realize that half of them were abnormal. We pupils of old Austria were brought up to respect old people and women. But on our professors we had no mercy. They were our natural enemies. The majority of them were somewhat mentally deranged, and quite a few ended their days as honest-to-God lunatics. I was in particular bad odor with the teachers. I showed not the slightest aptitude for foreign languages, though I might have had not the teacher been a congenital idiot. I could not bear the sight of him. August 29th, 1942. Our teachers were absolute tyrants. They had no sympathy with youth. Their one object was to stuff our brains and turn us into erudite apes like themselves. If any pupil showed the slightest trace of originality, they persecuted him relentlessly. And the only model pupils whom I have ever got to know have all been failures in afterlife. September 7th, 1942. To his dying day, it is obvious, Hitler never forgave his teachers for the poor marks they had given him, nor could he forget. But he could distort to a point of grotesqueness. The impression he made on his teachers, recollected after he had become a world figure, has been briefly recorded. One of the few instructors Hitler seems to have liked was Professor Theodor Gissinger, who strove to teach him science. Gissinger later recalled, "As far as I was concerned, Hitler left neither a favorable nor an unfavorable impression in Linz. He was by no means a leader of the class. He was slender and erect, his face pallid and very thin, almost like that of a consumptive, his gaze unusually open, his eyes brilliant." Professor Eduard Humer, apparently the congenital idiot mentioned by Hitler above, for he taught French, came to Munich in 1923 to testify for his former pupil, who was then being tried for treason as the result of the beer hall putsch. Though he lauded Hitler's aims and said that he wished from the bottom of his heart to see him fulfill his ideals, he gave the following thumbnail portrait of the young high school student. Hitler was certainly gifted, although only for particular subjects, but he lacked self-control, and, to say the least, he was considered argumentative, autocratic, self-opinionated, and bad-tempered, and unable to submit to school discipline. Nor was he industrious. Otherwise, he would have achieved much better results, gifted as he was. There was one teacher at the Linz High School who exercised a strong, and as it turned out, a fateful influence on the young Adolf Hitler. This was a history teacher, Dr. Leopold Purch, who came from the southern German-language border region where it meets that of the South Slavs, and whose experience with the racial struggle there had made him a fanatical German nationalist. Before coming to Linz, he had taught at Marburg, which later, when the area was transferred to Yugoslavia after the First World War, became Maribor. Though Dr. Purch had given his pupil marks of only fair in history, he was the only one of Hitler's teachers to receive a warm tribute in Mein Kampf. Hitler readily admitted his debt to this man. It was perhaps decisive for my whole later life that good fortune gave me a history teacher who understood, as few others did, this principle of retaining the essential and forgetting the non-essential. In my teacher, Dr. Leopold Purch of the high school in Linz, this requirement was fulfilled in a truly ideal manner. An old gentleman, kind but at the same time firm, he was able not only to hold our attention by his dazzling eloquence, but to carry us away with him. Even today I think back with genuine emotion on this gray-haired man who, by the fire of his words, sometimes made us forget the present, who, as if by magic, transported us into times past and, out of the millennium mists of time, transformed dry historical facts into vivid reality. There we sat, often aflame with enthusiasm, sometimes even moved to tears. He used our budding national